I do it terribly, but I love trying James's voice. Anyway, sorry for that random introduction. Welcome to episode 42 of the Rugby League Coach podcast. Of course, it's rugbyleaguecoach.com.au by Lee Addison.
Oh, yeah.
The man who founded this podcast, who founded rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. Little bit of a coaching connoisseur, can I say? Connoisseur? You like that? Connoisseur? Good ice cream's connoisseur. I don't know. You listen. You sit and think about that as I introduce you at the desk. Tim Cheeseman, the cheese is here. Sergeant Slaughter, as he's formerly known in the rugby league circles. Tim, how you going, mate? You got the glasses on. Geez, you are looking sharp today.
Yeah, they're a change, but no, going really well.
Going really well. Did you watch some rugby league this weekend?
Oh, only a little bit.
Only a little bit.
I think I watched every single game, both sides of the equator.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, Lee, it's time to turn to you. What shirt have you got on there? What polo shirt have you got on
This is my old Maple Park one.
Of course.
We've got that much gear at Maple Park in the rugby league and sports stuff. Like most of the clothes I wear around the house are Maple Park clothes.
Tim, have you seen any of that gear?
No.
Neither. That's
Tim shouldn't be saying anything about gear, actually. Right. Tim got a T-shirt today, actually.
I did. It is very, very nice. Very comfy.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll send you my address off early, and I'll sit outside.
I know where you live.
That's concerning. I've been doing a lot of travelling, and Lee knows where I live.
Chris will join us soon, lad.
Very good, very good. Well, Lee, continuing on with the new format of this podcast, being we all come to the episode with two different topics that we'd like to discuss, and we all sort of just meet in the middle like the Big Bang Clash and see what comes out. Instead of talking to you and asking you, as I've addressed this whole sentence to you, I'm going to backflip and say, Sergeant Slaughter, what's your first?
Well, you know what? Can I just say, I was going to say, ask Tim, because he told me before you got here, can I just say you were somewhat late today, somewhat tardy. And he said he's got 4 topics.
Four topics?
Including one brought from his son. So I would like to defer my starting spot to the cheese. Okay. The sergeant himself.
Just remember, I'm the coach of this podcast, and I picked him first. So let's not pretend who put on the bench here, lad. You were benched to start with. Tim, as the starting number 7, can you please lead us forward with the topics and steer us around the paddock?
One of the ones I came up with after watching a lot of football on the weekend on both sides of the equator was the difference between the Super League and the NRL refs.
Right. So this is obviously a topic you've brought forward and something you've had to think about, and you've obviously got an opinion on this. So I'm going to go throw to Lee first and just say, whilst hearing that, what do you think the key difference are between Super League referees, NRL referees?
I tend not to focus too much on the referee themselves as more the rules and the way they're interpreted. So first of all, though, what I will say is the same thing that I said last week, which is I believe the referees in Australia are somewhat overcoached. I mean, at the risk of sounding repetitive, you know, some of the things that are getting labelled as hip drops are somewhat sketchy. I mean, you know, so for example, so that just shows you that officialdom is confused. So that's that. So they're probably a bit more coached in Australia because of the resources available. I think ultimately one of the big differences is the speed of the play the ball. So one thing I noticed even a decade and a half ago when I arrived and coached in the community game in Australia when I arrived, it's like WrestleMania over here compared to Super League. It's like absolute WrestleMania because there's so much more goes into the ruck in terms of, again, resource. I mean, most clubs in the NRL have a wrestling coach or sort of
outsource
or a consultant or whatever it may be. But also in England, there's been an obsession over the years with speeding the game up so that it becomes more palatable to the wider public. So, whereas in Australia, a lot of the speeding up of the game has gone towards shot clocks, scrum clocks, dropout clocks and the like. In England, it's gone a lot more around the play the ball. Is that what you noticed this weekend, Tim? That they're sort of down and they're up. There's no.
Well, between the games, there was one game, like the Hull game, that the ruck control in that was so slow, and you could see the players trying to get up, and they were allowed to be held down for so much longer than the Wiggins and Helens game. The Wiggins and Helens game, they were down, they were straight up. It was
so
great.
What you're saying there is inconsistency, and I guess.
But it was the same in the Australian. Like, there was a difference between. Another incident was in the Super League. So many of the players have their head being pushed into the ground, and that when they're on the ground, a lot of facials and that sort of stuff. And in Australia, that seems to have been taken out of it. It's more.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, mate, there's more resource over here. So if you think about it, right, the first thing you said was the inconsistent nature across two Super League games. Again, with the coaching and the resources available, there'll be more analytics in the NRL going into making sure everyone's consistent. Number two, what I'll call the extracurricular activities. I feel the game in Australia is far more sanitized than the one in England.
Yes,
to the point where you can probably get away with a little bit more in the ruck if you want to. In England, when I say get away with things, I mean extracurricular activities. But yeah, I think the main difference overall, I mean, the fact that one ref, Tim, was making them get up really quickly shows you that's the dominant trait kind of thing. Like most Super League games you watch, they're up really quickly.
Yeah, they are.
It'll be interesting to see if Chris has seen that in Super League as well. Oh, sorry, I'm not the host.
Yeah, you're not the host. I was about to throw that. Thanks, that Lee. I'll let you waft on with your point before I interjected. That's something I don't know if you write down notes. Maybe you could write that down. Anyway, Chris Bugden, pronounced Bugden, unlike Lee, who said Budgeon for a long time, has joined the podcast. He's back. He's back. Chris, Tim just brought up a point. Noticing the differences and then the similarities between the NRL and the Super League over the weekend with refereeing. In your dealings with the Super League, watching that game and then the NRL, did you pick up any sort of similarities or inconsistencies between the two in the way they were officiated?
I wasn't really paying attention to the way they're officiated. I have watched a bit of Super League, though. This is the first season in probably 4 or 5 years that I've watched any of it. My gut feeling is that they're closer together now, the styles of play, to what they have been. Well, they were 4 or 5 years ago when I did watch a few games. The ruck speeds is almost as fast, I'd say. I don't know that the collisions and the defensive structures are as tight as in the NRL, but I can't say I picked up too much with regards to the officiating, other than, I guess, now that you've made me think about it, I think the Super League refs are a little more confident in their calling, and they don't necessarily get overruled as much. Well, I haven't seen them get overruled as much by the bunker, and I don't know what system they even use over there, but the refs seem to be confident and in control, and I've really enjoyed watching the Super League, actually, for what I've seen.
Yeah, that's a similar trait to the Chiefs said. But I think one thing that I've picked up by hearing you guys say that is in Super League, it sounds like you do, as you said, Chris, you have a clear man in the middle. Probably the point out of that for the NRL is who is the man in control of the game. I would say more often than not, it's not the referee. I would say that it's more the bunker. The referee makes calls live. The bunker will just come over the top and say, sorry, mate, this is what actually happened.
Yeah, there's too much chirping in their ear all the time. How can you do a job with your earphones in?
That's it. And we talked about it last week just at the community level, and that's just for 2 touch judges and a referee.
Yeah.
You throw in a bunker and a match official and anyone else that's got an NRL badge on their shirt into the mix. And I tell you, it's a tough job for the refs out there now to just to have any clarity of thought.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be tough. I mean, having the chatter in the background and, I guess it would affect your confidence as well. If you make a call live and you stand behind it and someone straight away comes over the top of you every 5 minutes and says, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, it's going to make you more tentative, isn't it? It's going to make you sit on your haunches a little more because you're getting publicly ousted every 5 minutes.
I'm going to make Tim Cheeseman feel a little bit more tentative now too. Do you notice you're the only one who watches refs? you want to be a ref?
No, I would just
You'd
watch
be a good ref, actually, Sarge.
I would just watch how the game's played and watch the structures on both attack and defence. And I really notice on when the play breaks down, on why it breaks down and how that breakdown could be nullified without it actually breaking down. Like if they could have passed it out, gone the other way, just looking at it as a whole. And it's just one of the things that I picked up was just the difference between two Super League games and then the difference between NRL games and the Super League ones that I saw being officiated. Like, how can you be put on report for a facial?
I think TB's nailed it in the sense that there's just too much chirping going in the ears, and who is in charge? I think Taylor's nailed it really.
Yeah, I think there's just too much, and I guess Lee, just to say something, you said, does Tim want to be a referee? And you straight away said no. Well, that's probably one of the issues we've spoken about several times as well. And I think a lot of us would know what happened to a certain referee in the Brisbane area over the last, I think it was 2 weekends ago now. Mate, it's one of the toughest jobs in the field. No one gives you any love for it. And, you can, as proven recently, you can walk away with a severe head knock. So, it's one of the toughest jobs and heavily scrutinised. But yeah, hats off to them. They do a really, really good job.
Yeah,
I think there's
definitely.
real cause and effect in there too, Taylor, in the sense nowadays that, like when I first started watching football, there was one game on a weekend. Now every single game isn't just available to view, but it's picked apart with so many different camera angles. And I think the expectation on referees is actually too high because we've got to remember it's sport, it's not science. There's going to be mistakes made, and as coaches, we probably all ref the pose sessions and that sort of thing. And every time I come away from reffing in a pose session, I could probably count. Well, I need a lot of hands to count the number of times where I wasn't 100% sure of the call.
I'm glad you brought that up, Chris.
And I just think that we analyse them too much and we hold them to too high an account. And I can't remember which ref it was, but it was one from back in the 80s, and his mantra was, if they ever said, did it happen as you called it? And he said, it always happens as I call it. And in his mind, what he called was what he believed happened, and they just move on. And Mick Stone was interviewed on the ABC on the weekend too, and that was his mantra, was you just move on, you make a decision, you move on. But we don't let them now.
Can I just ask you this forum, who can guess which person here has officiated in a test match? As in been the main referee?
Well, it's
so one of the four people here has been a referee in an international sanctioned test match.
I know it's not me.
I know it's not me.
Well, there you go. It's Chris.
yeah. I didn't want to tell you, but it's me. Yeah. 2003, Russia under-21s versus Great Britain under-21s girls.
How did that go with the language barrier? In
Kazan, Russia.
How did that go with the language barrier?
Well, you don't need a penalty. It's fine.
And then Vladimir Putin looks at you and goes, and you go, oh, no, the other way.
Just out of his throat.
Suddenly the arms start changing.
Does anybody here remember years ago, Lee, you might be old enough to remember, there was a referee when we used to have the independent refs for test matches, and he was a French guy called Julien Rascagnier or something like that.
I remember him.
And he couldn't speak a word of English, and he was terrible at refereeing.
And do you remember Monsieur Sablé Rolls? Monsieur Sablé Roll. I do.
Tell me
it was part of the entertainment value, though.
That's what I was about to say. Tell me that wasn't put in there by someone that just goes, "Oh, this will be a real."
No, that's a genuine ref. I'll Google him now. While you're hosting, Taylor.
He did more than one. He must have done 3 or 4.
What was your ref that you're talking about? What was he called?
Julian something, wasn't he?
Rascagnier?
Yeah, he was in the early Super League days, wasn't he?
He may have been late 80s. You remember him, Tim?
Julien Rascagnier. Oh, no, sorry, he was the 82. So I don't actually remember him. He was like 82-ish. Yeah. But I have heard of him. Keep the hosting, Taylor. Just leave it with me.
That's all right. No worries. I'll leave it with you, Lee. So Chris came up just halfway through. Tim Cheeseman had the first subject pick of the night. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you for the next subject pick. That you're first of two. What have you got? Well, you're Googling. Otherwise, I would have gone to you. You took your name out of the ring, then you've blown up because you haven't been picked. This is the biggest toys out of the cop moment I've heard. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
No, you're right. I hesitate to bring up one of my topics because last week I wanted to ban the use of the term X Factor. And what did I hear for the first 5 or 10 minutes of just about every football game? Commentators talking about the X Factors involved in each side. So I've pretty much created that for myself. But I also, I am a school teacher and I believe in the evolution of the English language, but the term versing only refers to poetry. There is no such thing as versing.
It's very much an Australian thing, that.
Well, I wish it wasn't.
It was not used in England. We say verses.
Yeah, well, verses is a Latin term and there's no suffix on the end of it. But anyway, I won't go with that because that'll put our listeners to tears, Taylor, and probably upset you.
You're just a whinger, aren't you?
This week on Literacy Unfiltered, we have Chris Bugden.
Can I just say something about the literacy thing? I was talking with my mate the other day, right, and we were saying how Shakespeare will probably be turning in his grave the way that people spell these days, kids how they spell. Wherefore art thou has now become WRU in written form in a text message.
Yeah. But he just made up words anyway, Lee.
Well, so did Junior, so the kids.
And you know what? I think Shakespeare would be fine. I mean, he had to sit there with a quill and ink and write all these pages for entertainment when he could just go down the footy and watch Trell Mitt. I think if Shakespeare was here, he'd be in a box at the SFS every weekend. He'd be loving it, you know. I think Shakespeare would just be he'd be head spun by rugby league. You wouldn't worry about the words and the language. Don't worry about that. It's only Chris, the one that still gets upset about it. That's it.
It is.
So Chris, is that you telling me that was your first of 2 points? Have you blown one on the English language?
No, I've got 3 written down, but I don't know if you'll let me have 3 because you're a much stricter host than Lee.
I'll let you go for 2 because 1 was terrible.
Okay. Mate, when I was hosting, we'd been through 4 topics by now because I was just cutting you off.
Yeah, but Lee, you're all fancy stuff. I'm all meat. I'm all value. That's what I am. I'm all conversation.
I know you're more meat, Taylor. Yeah.
You want all the bright, pretty lights. You know what I mean? You see a neon sign and you run for it. I like substance in my relationships, and that's what I'm going for. Yeah.
You keep your substances to yourself, lad.
Okay, I will throw one more in there. The Cowboys were known last year as a team that showed a lot more steel and resilience from the year before.
Mm.
We've heard it mentioned that the Warriors, maybe up until the weekend, but we've heard it mentioned many times that they're showing a lot more resilience and a lot more steel. And I love the fact that the term resilience has become part of the rugby league vernacular. But I want to throw it up there to you guys, partly from my own coaching development, but is the resilience, the steel, we talked about effort last week and a little bit the week before. I want to know what you guys think about how much influence a coach has on creating that resilience in a squad, creating that sort of steel, that determination in defence, you know, your 3 and 4 sets on your own line, working for each other, those things that don't require talent. How much influence? I mean, you know, the Storm pre-season camps are famous for their Marine style, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and getting out and, you know, really putting people out of their comfort zone. But is it that, or is it the mix of personalities that you've got and that if you've got enough players that are driven to be, you know, resilient, to bounce back, to be determined and have persistence and you know, all of those qualities, where would you tip the balance? Would you tip it in favour of a coach that can pull that out of their players, or in the balance of, you know, if you've got 4 or 5 hard heads that can drag the rest of them along? I'd be interested in you guys because it's something that I think as a coach, I'd love to be able to influence it, but I think we can have some influence, but I'd love to hear your input.
Can I start, Taylor?
Yeah, you can start, mate. I'll go after you.
First of all, that was the longest question in the history of this podcast, by the way.
I'll anchor, mate. I'll anchor.
Imagine what my answer was. No.
Well, now you've just taken my third topic off me.
Lee, your next topic.
Yeah. Right, okay, I'll try and answer it as succinctly and simply as possible. Basically, yes, a coach can influence it. You can influence it in your pre-season. You can influence it in your messaging. You can influence it, I think, in teaching your players and your people what being resilient means, right? So what does it mean? It means if something has gone well, you don't think you're the king of the world or queen of the world. If something's gone poorly, you don't think you're the worst in the world or everything's going to cave in. I would say that's a very simple way of looking early doors about resilience. There's things you can do in your training about pain threshold in terms of, and by pain threshold, I don't mean true pain. I mean training pain in terms of, yes, you can make that. You can hold that plank for 5 minutes, or yes, you can lift that in the bench press in the gym in the bench press area. Those kind of things build resilience, and you get more resilient the more confident you are. So you get more confidence the more things that you crack, don't you? So you get more confident at riding a bike if you ride a bike and don't fall off it. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is it's got to be from the person who's got to have the ability to fall into line with that too. So first of all, you could get somebody that you consider to be mentally weaker and make them mentally tougher at football because they adapt to that training and they adapt to that style and they rise to it. But the key is that other party needs to be able to react to that. Some people come to your training environment and they're the leaders of the mental toughness. They're the leaders of there's some people I've trained, there's some people I've been involved with and even have coached with. I mean, I'm just dealing with, Tim's here now, right? Just being on the coaching field with him, like he thinks nothing of going out and marching around in the heat and this, that, and the other, whereas I'll be like, I'll stay in the shade for as long as I can. Maybe he's a bit more resilient in that regard, because he's been in this country twice as long as I have. Taylor, we always go back to your playing days. I would say in your year 11, Taylor, you weren't particularly mentally tough in the sense that if something didn't go your way, you tended to deflect it and make it seem like you weren't bothered by it or whatnot. But obviously at some point over the summer that year, you reflected and did some mental somersaults and some mental gymnastics, and you came back and you were ready for every challenge. So the players definitely got to come to the party, but some people are just mentally tough anyway. James Tedesco, who has had some great news today, Teddy, he's announced it today. His missus is expecting, not Teddy. I'd say he was mentally tough and resilient and still is, because whether things went well, didn't really faze him. Poorly, didn't really faze him. Like he was just on a level all the time, and he's still that to this day, I think. But he still works on it. He's got a mind coach or somebody of that. So who's labelled as a mind coach.
Part B of the longest question in podcasting history is then what's happened to the Cowboys if they had this resilience last year? They haven't had a massive turnover of personnel. They've lost one guy who would probably fit into the category you've described in Tom Gilbert. But I guess, and that's what prompted me thinking about it, Lee, is that Todd Payton's still the same coach. Where did it go?
There's always that risk that the short-term mental growth you've had isn't sustainable. So we're very good as humans of doing things for a short period of time and burst. If I say, right, being a school teacher, right, how hard does everyone go? All the teachers go in the first few weeks of term and they rush around and they want to do all these projects, but you just know that half of it isn't going to be sustainable. Yeah. It's the truly resilient ones who sustain it, right? And it's the same. So there's always that question that needs to be asked. Probably the most obvious one, though, and the one that possibly jumps out to me is, it is possibly impossible to raise your standards so much and keep them there constantly. So the key thing is with the Cowboys, I don't think they'll completely bottom out. So I don't think we're looking at the wooden spooners either, right? I just think that the preseason this year, if last year they went at 100% all the time, this year they probably thought they were going at 100%, but it might have been about 97. And it might have been less because of the World Cup players.
Mm.
And also, when you're the hunted instead of the hunter, there's a different mindset again. And that's why the best sports coaches and managers who can keep their teams winning and win, like the way Craig Bellamy keeps Melbourne so hungry, you know it's something to do with the coaching there, right? You know it.
Yeah.
And then you look at teams like Manchester United under Alex Ferguson and Man City even now under Pep Guardiola. They can keep going. This year, Pep Guardiola pushing for the league title with City still. Liverpool, who nearly went all the way last year and won a quadruple, have fallen off a cliff hugely. So that suggests that some of their players might not have the same. They might not be completely buying in. So it takes the player to buy in as well, you know.
Mm.
So, and if you ask me about City squad versus Liverpool squad, I'd take City squad over it any day, you know. So, for those very reasons. So I think, yeah, it's a bit nature,
not the salary cap,
a bit of nature and a bit of nurture.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and there's certainly a lot of nurture that comes with it, right? Like, a good example would be, you know, through my last couple of years at Redcliffe, Adam Mogg was our coach. And we certainly were a side that's played together for a long time. So we had a really good squad, a good nucleus of a squad there that had been together for a while. And we certainly had a togetherness about us that certainly had hallmarks of a side that would have resilience. Because as you say, there's, you know, reasons why you have resilience and how that's built. We probably had a few of those sort of key ingredients in there. And then we were always very fit side, so we had that physical ability to be a resilient side as well, because it does take a lot of effort to be a side that constantly turns up. But you also need to be sort of massaged and steered into the right direction. And I remember there was so many times where we'd have that resilience and defend. And a phrase sort of popped up with all of us, and it came from Moggy, where in the preseason he had a chat to us about how on average there's 3.5 minutes in every Q Cup game of live football. And after 3.5 minutes on average, there's a try, a penalty, a drop ball, a stoppage of some sort. So we used to do 4-minute con blocks. And then it built a bit of resilience in us that when there was, you know, we were defending our line or something happened, we'd just all turn around and say, it's just 4 minutes. It's just 4 minutes. And it sort of come along the line. So we had resilience in our side. We had the key ingredients. We had all that. But we'd sort of been massaged into this direction by a bit of information that the coach had given us. And then we trained to that effect. And then therefore that resilience came out on game day because there were key points that came up. So I think there's a lot of massaging that comes in there from the coach. That's just one example of one football side I've been in. Do you know what I mean?
The sergeant increases resilience by screaming at children.
Yeah, that's fine. And sometimes you need a bad guy.
Always bad. Always bad.
But yeah, that's in terms of the Cowboys. Look, I don't know. I think you said, well, Todd Payton's the same coach as he was last year. Well, maybe that's a problem. But I don't know. Maybe he's not the same coach he was last year. Everyone changes, has little things that affects them, and moves them in one way or another. It might not have anything to do with Payton, as Lee said. It could be players and their attitudes and how they've adjusted. So yeah, look, I don't know what the answer is with the Cowboys. I'm flabbergasted they keep ruining my tipping comps. It's killing me. But yeah, it's a good point to bring up because we did see polar opposites, didn't we, when the Cowboys played the Dolphins?
Because absolutely, it was a great example of a team that stuck to its processes and just toughed it out against a team that wanted to, I guess, maybe expected it a little bit. Yeah,
they really come there to play, and they did on the weekend, and it looked great.
Has there ever been a podcast that Taylor hasn't mentioned the Dolphins?
No, that's a negative ghostwriter. I bring it up every time. Lee, your first topic.
Are you sure you don't want to use your topic first, just because you keep pushing me to the back?
No, I went you because you purposely put yourself behind Chris in the last instance. So, yeah, now I'm going to you, Lee.
Who should be coach of the Dragons in 2024 and why? That's to say George Illawarra Dragons, that is, not Catalan Dragons or...
Shane Flanagan. And why? Because he's already there, and I think he's a premiership-winning coach and probably the first cab off the rank as unemployed qualified coaches.
He does have a bit of a scent about him, though, apparently around the clubs, because of what happened at Cronulla, because it was quite, Cronulla did end up putting national news a lot under his leadership, and I'm not judging it. I don't think that's a bad call at all.
Not Shane Flanagan is my answer. I think he's already been there. I think if you're going to bring in somebody new, you bring in somebody new, you overhaul. I tend to agree with Ben Hunt. I wouldn't mind seeing Anthony Griffin stick around.
You were nearly coached by him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was nearly coached by him, not quite, nearly. Which is a long story within itself. I think I've probably told it before.
I think you have.
Podcast.
For those listening for the first time, Taylor didn't get dropped or anything. Griffin dropped himself to Penrith.
Yeah, it was around the corner from preseason. I'd signed a 2-year contract under him at the Dolphins, and he got a gig, obviously coaching NRL at Penrith, so he took off. But that aside, look, I wouldn't mind seeing Anthony Griffin go around again. He obviously has the support of the playing group. I don't think they have a bad nucleus of a football team there. I think they've got a good football side when you look through their ranks. And yeah, their on-field performances have been up and down. I'd like to see some clubs start to push ownership back onto the back of house. And it's got to be the Dragons. It's got to be the Titans. It's got to be one of these sides that's lower down the pack, and they have to change something. I'd like to see them start cleaning up above house before they just start cleaning out coaches. That's what I'd like to see. That's a pipe dream. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Maybe it might happen with one of those clubs, but something's got to change. The on-field performances haven't been great for the large part of a decade, especially around the St. George Illawarra Dragons and the West Tigers. So why keep sacking coaches?
Aren't going to sack themselves, are they? The turkeys aren't going to vote for Christmas.
Yeah, I get that. But at what stage is enough? And at what stage does someone with a bit of power there above them, make some changes? I just think it has to. At the end of the day, everybody's answerable to someone. Everybody in this world is answerable to someone. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the coaching matters of 2023.
I'll just remind you're the host, Taylor, so you ask who comes next.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Lee, for picking up on that. Sergeant Slaughter, do you have anything to add to this topic?
I wouldn't mind seeing actually Brett Hodgson.
Or who? Sorry, you broke up there.
Brett Hodgson.
Okay.
Hodgson. He was the fullback for Tigers in 2005. He's done heaps over in the Super League, won titles and that sort of stuff. And even Lamb.
Yeah, okay.
They're just outside bringing something new to the Dragons because the last couple of years, they've just stayed in exactly the same sort of like mud sort of thing. Like they'll have a good game and then everything will just turn to absolute muck. And it's hard for supporters to follow their team when there's no consistency at all. Like you've got a couple of really consistent players in the team that are just getting better and better. But other than that, there's too much just drop ball, stupid mistakes that I don't think it's the coach's fault, but the coaches are the ones that get blamed for it. But just at the start of the year, they cleaned out everyone bar the coach. So he was told basically that if he doesn't perform, then it's his head on the line. Why not bring someone in from somewhere else to do that? Brett Hodgson's in Australia. He's the defensive coach for for Australia, I think it is, for the rugby union. Or even staying in Australia. On Lee's post, I agreed with him with Des.
Yeah.
Des Hasler, like he does it his way, which is what basically I believe has got to happen at a couple of clubs. They've got to things have got to change. And whether it's players moved on or, it's really hard. But, I'd go with either Hodgson or even Hodgson and Lamb. Get them both in there, assistant coaching and head coach. Like, both of them are fantastic players, and they've shown that they can coach as well.
All right, interesting take there, Tim. Thanks, mate. A couple of outsiders there. I didn't even think of either of those two men, to be honest, when Lee brought up the question. Now, it's time for my topic. I'm just going to throw out a question to the group. Martin Tapau, Jordan Rapana, was that a penalty, yes or no? If yes, explain. If no, explain.
It was one of my topics I had, so I think this might be the first time topics have clashed. I'm not sure. I think, can I answer it in reverse?
I think you're going to anyway.
I was going to listen to how he felt and then
do what you wanted anyway.
It's actually, he actually caught the ball. So either way, Canberra would have had possession. So anybody who's complaining that it cost Brisbane the game and this, that, and the other, he actually catches the ball cleanly and lands on the ground and then puts the ball on the ground. Yep. Not in the cleanest fashion, but it'd be hard to when your noggin's torn open. I think, I don't want to be a hypocrite and have a go at the NRL for overanalyzing everything and then overanalyze this thing. But Tapau did lead with his knees. He didn't lead with his knees clearly, but he didn't make any effort to lean down and put his shoulder in either. So he was, in that instance, he was quite happy to not really bend into the tackle. And I know it happened really quickly. And I know Rapana fell down, but I would have thought it probably would be a penalty. The key question is, if Rapana didn't have blood everywhere and just slowly got up and played the ball, would it have been given a penalty? And I do think the term duty of care has been used, and I don't think it's necessarily clear about that, but you can sort of tell sometimes as well intent. And I just think I saw it a little bit into Powell's face that he meant it. So I'm leaning towards penalty. But either way, Brisbane shouldn't have got possession.
Yeah, okay. Tim, Chris, anyone?
Yep. Yeah, I'd say no penalty. And I think, and again, it might be 49 to 51 percentage-wise. I'm just leaning slightly the other way to Lee. And I think the term duty of care is being overused almost to the point of abuse. The duty of care in law is for something reasonably foreseeable. And if you can reasonably foresee something happening and you could injure someone, then you have a duty of care to avoid that injury. I don't believe a lot of I've got to be careful what I say here, but I think we're relying on duty of care to cover up a multitude of possible injury situations. I mean, the so-called hip drop tackle saga at the moment, again, they're talking about duty of care. A lot of them are accidents and a lot of them aren't reasonably foreseeable. Yes, if they've got time, and again, as I said, I'm 49-51. I'm not suggesting that it was a blatant miscarriage of justice against Martin Tapau or anything like that. But I think we're also expecting players to be a little bit too reactive at times, and they're human. And I certainly don't think it would have even been a penalty if there wasn't blood spilt and if he wasn't, as obviously injured as he was.
Yeah, I'm the same as Chris. I don't think that if Rapana stayed down, if he hadn't have stayed down, then we wouldn't be talking about this. And likewise, 49-51, because everyone understands now what the NRL is any sort of contact with the head and it's penalised straight away.
We can go full circle here, right? So say somebody does a squirrel grip on your meat and 2 veg. I'm not talking just in life in general. I'm talking about on the field. You have a bit of a stressed look about you, then, Tim.
I was about to say when? Just then?
Yeah. But the bunker notices it and the ref doesn't, or the player doesn't get up and plays the ball and writhes around in agony. Don't those in the bunker, etc., look for what's happened? And then wouldn't a penalty be given if they found it?
Yeah, probably.
So that rationale about the blood and the like, can I ask, are we all in agreement that they're probably... It's not a terrible decision for them to think something foul has happened?
I just think with the day and age, it's not necessarily that whether something foul has happened or not. I just think the blood was evidence of a real injury, because we're seeing a lot these days. NRL players will stay down if they think there's something that could have possibly happened to them in that tackle, and it will be picked up on the bunker. You see it every match. Adam Reynolds did it on the weekend. He just stopped. He didn't. He looked at the ref and just stopped and just went, oh, because he expected that the bunker would look at it. So I think, everyone's saying, well, the blood's a real indication. It's sad that we're there. It's sad that we're there. It is sad that we're there. Like that we have to say, right, there's physical, like there's something that shows me that this player is injured. Therefore, that's why we believe it. That's why we think it's a penalty. I don't agree with you, Lee, in saying that Tapau gave away anything in his face. I've been in that situation plenty of times, especially as a big lad, and you would have too, where you're thundering down the field, probably never chased so hard in your life because there's only 5 minutes to go and you could make a real difference here. And suddenly Rapana sort of drops in front of you and you look down and you're almost shocked of what's happened, and your knee collects him in the head. You know what I mean?
What would you do if that person's head was pissing out with blood and they were clearly
what do you mean
out of consciousness?
What would I do if I was the bloke that did it?
Yeah.
Oh,
play on.
It is play on. Yeah. I mean, until the ball's dead, it's play on.
But then what would you do in the immediate?
Oh, you check if he was okay, and Tapau did that.
Yeah. He even went up to Rapana's family after the game before he even went into.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there was any intent on malice. I don't think there was any intent on malice. That's my opinion. And I'm happy to be wrong there. But in terms of should it be a penalty or not, I'm going to say something different to all of you, and I'm just going to admit that I don't know. I don't know.
If it's a penalty,
I see arguments for, I see arguments against, and I see logic in both arguments. And I sit here as someone who's been involved in the game for a long time, have analysed the game, under a microscope for a while now, ever since it sort of became something I wanted to do with my life. And I don't know. I don't know. And there needs to be a definitive ruling where we all should know. And I think that's a problem.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to bring it back full circle again in as Lee did earlier. And the ref's there to make a 50-50 call, and we accept it. If we're, debating whether or not it should be or shouldn't be, then accept the referee's decision and move on. Yeah. I know that wouldn't create as much news for the this 24-hour news cycle that they keep talking about, but that's what refs are for, to make a decision, and we accept the decision and we move on.
The Broncos fans booing Rapana on the way off was disgusting.
Yeah, that was
terrible. And even worse, because they saw that physical blood. They saw what happened. Booing him on the way out is just what are you going to get out of that? Who wins there? No one wins.
You're hardly milking it, are you, when blood is streaming out your head?
Mate, there's milk coming out of his head. Have a look at it. It's just there's 3 liters. He would have lost half a liter there. He would have lost half a liter.
It was spurting out. It was when he rolled over, you could see it actually spurting out.
I mean, that area does above the eyebrows and whatnot. Yeah. It's notorious for that, but blood is blood at the end of the day. So
yeah. So look, I'm glad that topic came up because it did stoke some people's mind. Who brought that topic up? That was a good one. Tim, we're going to go to I think we're up to your third topic now.
No, second.
Second? All right, Go on. Hit me.
My second was being coaches and that sort of stuff. What's the best for training? Is it core skills percentage-wise or plays percentage-wise? Because after speaking to a couple of different coaches today from a couple of different clubs, what they perceive as more dominant in their trainings, it's all up and down. I was just wondering
you can't carry out plays unless your core skills are suitable enough.
I guess that question, the answer to that question would scale depending on where you are and what you're doing. Yeah. I guess as you get further up the ladder, you would expect a lot of players come to the party with core skills. Therefore, you have the ability to run plays and be a bit focused on that. And you probably would go ahead and say, depending what time of the year it was, you depend on what, like, early in the preseason or those sorts of things, you'd probably do a lot of core skill just to get footy in your hand to break up a bit of fitness and those sorts of things. And you don't necessarily need to be practicing plays in November. But as you come closer and closer to the season starting, that's when you'd probably replace a bit of core skill with plays.
Core skill is essential to my game plan as a coach. Isn't it, Taylor?
Yeah.
It is basically a core skill game plan. So,
well, to be fair, Lee, you've sort of the teams I've seen you've coached, you've had different approaches to both. I think you had a different approach to that Greg side in year 11 than what you did in year 12 because it was a much different group of players where that year 12 side core skill was everything. If we didn't have core skill, we wouldn't have won a game because we weren't the sort of bigger sort of players with names. Whereas when you had that in year 11, when I was at St. Greg's, you did have what was a pretty physical pack with the likes of Grody and things like that, with a lot of bit larger names. So there was, core skill, while important that first year, wasn't as integral as it was the second to success.
I remember that second year really heavily coaching you in core skill because I thought if we don't, we've got less in the way of X Factor.
Yeah, it was just X Factor that year was probably just me and
you and Steele.
Can I phrase it? Can I phrase it one way? I think you can have core skills without plays and still play good footy, but I don't think you can have plays without core skills because it just leads to frustrations. Could be because they generally
just kept it there and got.
Well, and the other thing it also leads into something that I was kind of thinking about, but I don't have enough to go on, but. I got the impression in the Super League games that there were quite a few times on the couple of games that I watched on the weekend where they just went through plays instead of playing eyes up footy because that's what they've been coached to do in that position of the field and that type of thing. And I honestly believe if you teach, well, you've got to have core skills.
It happens in the NRL. I do a study on the Queensland teams every week, mate. Yeah. And all I keep saying is frontman football. One out.
Yeah. And you can still at most levels of footy, you can beat most oppositions with core skills and without even having too many plays. And I coach a reserve grade side. I give them plays and I give them structure more for their attacking confidence, knowing full well that if they put them on, it's in the first 10 minutes. And for the remainder of the half, it's just push-up football. And my focus at that level is consistently bringing core skills and upping their skill level, but giving them plays and giving them a bit of structure, mainly for their confidence and to think that they've got weapons in their arsenal that they could unleash. But I just think there's a combination of both, and given what Taylor said earlier, puts it into context really well. But I also, overcoaching the plays and reliance on plays, I think, gets away from playing eyes up footy and going at weak spots when you notice them, and playing some really good attacking football that opens up because of the circumstances of the game.
Yeah, and Lee could probably you're bang on, Chris. Lee will probably attest to this. Depending on what your side is and what you're coaching and what you're looking at, who you've got in your arsenal, sometimes you can have 9s, 1s, 7s, 6s, even back rowers to an extent that are so skillful that all shape and plays really do is just give you something that your team will naturally fall into when you get to a certain part of the field. So in case there's nothing obvious on that no one sees, you've still got questions to ask. You don't just go, I guess we'll do this. You have something set where your players naturally form.
We keep going back to the Greg's days because that's what brought you and I together In the very first game I coached at St. Greg's, we did a line shot at Patrician Brothers Blacktown, and we actually took the wrong option, and we went short to Michael Tonner rather than out the back to, it would have been...
Sabir.
No, not yet. It wasn't Sabir then. It was...
Jay Bennell?
Yep. We didn't go out the back. But Tonner just bumped the person out of the way that was in front of him.
Yeah.
And scored under the sticks. So we made the wrong option. We took the wrong option, but it didn't matter because we had the quality of player that could do something. So you know you're a good team, right? When you can take the wrong options but still have the good right outcome.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that, sorry, just getting back to your point, Tim, I have had conversations with my teams so many times where I'm trying to remove this paradigm that they think that the plays are there's a goal to a play. Sometimes I think a lot of teams and a lot of players think that we're putting a play on to make a line break. And if that doesn't happen, very little happens on the next play. Whereas as far as I'm concerned...
It happens there.
Yeah, exactly. But and I try and coach the mentality that a play or a shape or whatever you want to call it, yes, it could lead to a line break, but ultimately we're also leading to try and gain momentum and play off the back of that. And the core skills come with the eyes up of ruck recognition, the pushing up around, and then just going at holes and going at numbers, mismatch numbers, and that type of thing. It could be off the back of a play or a shape, but often you're just going forward with the football in those momentum situations.
Yeah.
No worries. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's 9:37. We've been tickling at this for just a tick over an hour.
What clock are you looking at?
Oh, the wrong one.
Don't forget you joined 15 minutes late.
Oh, there it is. That's a jab from Leroy.
Can I bring one more topic up, please?
Can I finish my sentence? I was about to say, Lee, do you have another topic? Because Chris did 3 in one. The Slaughter's done 2. Mm-hmm. So, Lee, do you want to bring up a topic, mate? Just let me get there. Thank you.
Well, we've gone the whole pod without mentioning West Tigers, and I'm going to continue in that realm. I'm going to hey, calm the farm.
Jeez. We'll get 2 points this week.
We
will get 2 points this week.
Calm the farm, whinging Chris. I said we've gone the whole pod without mentioning West Tigers, and I'm still not going to mention them because I think the way Para were yesterday was potentially an even bigger problem, because it's one thing West Tigers being terrible.
Thanks for not mentioning them.
Yeah, but Para were in last year's grand final, are sitting near the bottom of the NRL ladder right now, and had to battle to get over the West Tigers yesterday, to the point where there was even a little bit of squeaky bum time.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
Para are right now in 14th on 4 points. The other teams that are on 4 points, to put it into some context, Canberra Raiders, Cowboys, Canterbury are above them with 2 points. St. George, who are looking for a new coach, are above them by 2 points. Manly, who many are saying have now reached their peak and already dropping, are above them in 7 points. So there's going to be no Para fan thanks me for saying this, but I think they are in a little bit of trouble.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I think they did struggle to beat a pretty poor side. The Tigers still weren't good, but sorry.
No, sorry. I thought you finished. That's why I went in. You're right. No,
I have. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
If it was me, you say I was interrupting.
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't think Para are a shade on what they were last year.
Like Para are playing the Dogs this week. Who'd tip Para?
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to tip Para. I think the thing is, there were some really good moments in that game for Para. Like, I turned the TV on because my wife told me to do some housework, and I was like, and then turned KO on. And obviously the game was on, so I timed that perfectly to a T. And it was about 5 minutes in, and then Para scored 2 quick tries just after the 10-minute mark. And I thought they felt him out. They scored 2 cracking tries. I thought this is just going to be a slaughter. So I went and did the housework. I did. I just went, well, we've all seen this before. I don't really want to see the Tigers murdered on national TV. Like I've seen that plenty recently. I'll leave them go. I'll leave that go to the keeper. And I mowed the lawns. And then when I come back and saw that scoreline, I thought, wow, haven't they gone downhill if that's where they're at in relation to the Tigers, especially how good they looked early. I just went, this club's in trouble.
Maybe we just need to copy and paste what we said about the Cowboys.
Yeah. I think maybe so. I think maybe so. Well, you look, the Cowboys have struggled. The Para have struggled. Is it a little bit to do with the fact they went so deep in the final series, then they lost players to the World Cup? Are we seeing a burnout here? Are the other players?
What I will say though is the Para are further in their journey under their coach and as a group than the Cowboys are.
Yep.
So they should be. Really, you should be looking at Parramatta in a similar vein to the way you're looking at Penrith.
Yep.
And look at the way Penrith are kicking on now.
Yeah.
So I do think. I mean, I think the Cowboys falling into a little bit of a slump. You can sort of cop that. Para falling into this slump is a worry.
I think with Para too is that with all of the media frenzy over all of the contract negotiations with Moses, how it dragged on and on and on and on, that there's playing on them. And with the club coming out and openly saying they don't want their captain at fullback.
They've got the second worst defensive record in the competition right now as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And a lot of the games they've been involved in, so this week's game was 28-22, so that's reasonably high scoring. Last week, the Roosters 28-20, that's reasonably high scoring. The Manly game was like a game of basketball, wasn't it? It was. Yeah. If they hadn't have aimed up against Penrith, I mean, they won a game in Golden Point, right? That means you can lose a game in Golden Point too. They'd be in real trouble. Manly 34-30. Cronulla lost 26-30 to Cronulla. They're big scores. They're losing some. They seem to be going well against the bigger sides. Like Storm, they push close. Penrith, they push close and beat. But the teams you're thinking they should put away, they're either losing or
smells of attitude.
Home.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Smells of attitude from that.
And if you think back to a year ago, it was very similar, except they'd win one week and then lose the next. It was like that. Whereas at the minute, they're not doing the winning bit, are they?
No. And essential. You have to win.
Before you go, Taylor, because I can see you flagging. Alain Sablé-Rolle was the referee in the Ashes series of 1990. October the 27th, November the 10th, November 24th. Great Britain versus Australia. He was also the referee for the World Club Challenge in 1991 between Wigan and Penrith, and also a match between Wales and England at the Vetchfield on November the 27th, 1991.
Beautiful. Thanks, Lee.
I am the Dave Middleton of this podcast.
Yeah, but Dave Middleton doesn't look it up on the screen every 5 minutes.
What does he do then?
He puts it in his head, and your head's bigger than his. You should be able to put plenty in. Should be room, and there should be room for days.
Okay, Pumpkinhead.
I do look like a pumpkin head at the moment.
I know.
I've got the same noggin as what's his name? Bloke I'm thinking about.
A pumpkin.
No, not a pumpkin. If I say his name, I'll get his name. I'll think about it. I'll say it next podcast. It'll come to my head. I'm seeing him clearly, but I just can't get the name. I'll get there. All right, gentlemen. Well, that's just about wraps up episode 42. Any final finishing, touching thoughts on anyone? Lee, how's your road show going?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Me and Tim have been out grafting today. Chris sat and watched for a bit last week, didn't you?
Yep.
60 bin lids today. 60-ish. I'm expecting that, mate. It's going well. Melbourne next week.
Okay. Down south. It'll be cold there, mate.
I know.
Be cold.
I'll bring the mic with me, mate. Don't worry.
You take the mic with you. We'll catch you down Melbourne ways. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We will see you next week. Have an enjoyable one. Good.
You too.
Watch your footy, enjoy it, and we'll talk then.
Sounds good.
See you.